share the initial slide.
Okay, I will share the initial slide. Let me see. There we go.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to all of you for our event for today, International Women's Day 2022. And we are discussing, we have a panel discussion today on the topic of breaking the bias in software testing. And I have the privilege to be the host of today. And we have 5 amazing achievers from the world of testing: Isabel Evans, Maaret Pyhajaravi, Pauline Smith, Sharon Cameron, and Sue Atkins. I warmly welcome all of our audience and panelists to the session today. It is indeed the third decade of 21st century, and as an evolving human society, gender parity and equality is a matter of immense debate and deliberation, but it's not a confirmed reality. As we celebrate International Women's Day, we have an opportunity to bring the much-needed spotlight on diversity, empowerment, equitability, inclusion, well-being, and so many aspects which are not in balance across the gender spectrum. A chance to reflect on how much progress we have made as a society. Do we still attach a female or a woman precinct to a job title? Do we still undermine a person's ability based on a gender for certain roles? Are many women busy fighting the battles against bias as against focusing on achievements? Has the prejudice over centuries left a deep dent on the collective confidence of female population across the globe? How has this lack of female representation impacted teams, boards, organizations, and society in general? These are just a few of the innumerable questions that haunt us over the many years. But amongst the doom and gloom of the struggle for equality, there have been dazzling examples of those who strived to break the bias and become trailblazers, role models, and giving us hope of different possibilities. And it is my honor to be introducing 5 such achievers from the world of testing: Isabel Evans, Maaret Pyhajaravi, Sue Atkins, Pauline Smith, and Sharon Cameron. Thank you ever so much for joining us today for this panel discussion. And just to kind of give all our audience a view of how we're going to format today's session, we're going to kickstart with a brief introduction from all of our panelists. They will speak briefly about the topic for today, the theme of today, which is breaking the bias in software testing. And then we'll go into a panel discussion based on a Mentimeter poll, which was an audience poll that we ran ahead of this event. So we'll go into the poll and see which were the most popular topics that the audience wanted to hear more about from our panelists. And we'll go into a discussion on the top 2 most popular topics. And with that, I would like to kickstart the event, and over to Isabel Evans, please.
Two years of Zoom meetings and I still forget to unmute when I start talking. So my name's Isabel Evans. I did a computer science degree in the 1970s. I've been in software testing from the 1980s onwards. I've worked as a tester, a test manager, a quality manager, consultant, and a teacher. And now I am a postgraduate research student at the University of Malta, looking into a software testing topic for my research. On the topic for today, breaking the bias, I think an awful lot in certain countries has already been achieved over the decades. So one of the things I'd like to say is, as we are breaking glass ceilings and opening doors for ourselves, we need to not re-establish those glass ceilings and close those doors behind us. I think that's important. There are many, many groups who are underrepresented, particularly in IT. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Isabel. Over to Maaret, please.
My name is Maaret Pyhajaravi. I'm a principal test engineer at Vaisala. That's my current title, and it basically means I still do testing after 25 years. And I absolutely love testing. I wouldn't give it up for the world. The theme of today is on the bias side. Maybe my connection to that is on the idea that I haven't been doing test automation for more than maybe 6 to 8 years, something in that time frame. And at the time when I started to really be code oriented, I realized only at that point that testing wasn't as equal as I thought it was by that time. So there's definite differences depending on how you profile yourself. And that bias shows in day-to-day life. And I'd love it to be so that there's always everyone is encouraging the skills and the new learning that we decide to take upon ourselves. So that's my takeaway for today.
Thank you, Maaret. Could I please invite Pauline to please share some views?
Okay. Hi, I'm Pauline Smith. I'm the Operations Director at 2i, and I've worked in testing for many years, previously holding the position as Head of Testing and Implementation Management at Clydesdale and Yorkshire Bank. On Beat the Bias, when I was having a think about this, I was brought up in a house where my mum was a major wage earner in our house, and my dad did all the chores to help support my mum. So I didn't really see a bias growing up. And it was only when I went to study computer science at university, I realised I was only one of 4 females in the course. And over the years, I've never really felt that being female has held me back in any way. However, it has been challenging at times and overwhelming at others. If you mean the phrase, it's okay not to be okay, if you mean, probably applies to all of us at times. But the most rewarding achievements sometimes are the most difficult to do. For me, the thing that has enabled me to be the person that I am today from a work point of view is flexibility. It's so important that we offer everyone flexibility to allow them to achieve great things, whatever they want to do, if you mean, whatever their background, if you mean, is, by providing flexibility that allows us all to shine. And I think that's really key for us going forward.
Thank you, Pauline. Could I request Sharon to please share some thoughts?
Yeah, try to find the mute button. So yeah, I'm Sharon Cameron. I'm currently the Head of Quality Assurance at Virgin Money. My career started off, I was very much maths head and falling into testing like a lot of testers do, follow that kind of methodical mind. So throughout my career, I have been very much subjected to biases, purely, and a number of them. So whether it be age bias, gender bias, maternal bias, when you were going through that whole maternity thing, and feminism. So a lot of these situations throughout my career has very much impacted who I am today. I very much focus on, and I always say this, I was raised by my nana, and she was always, what doesn't kill you will make you stronger, and keep fighting. And I don't know if that's a very Scottish thing, but having that instilled in me as a little girl right through, I have never stopped any of these biases stopping me in my track, and why I think it is key for every single one of us it's up to us all to ensure that we continue to drive that forward for women in technology, as well as testing, of course.
Thank you very much, Sharon. And finally, our own STG's own Sue Atkins, please, if you could come to the virtual stage.
Brilliant, thank you. Yes, I always find it fascinating how many of the other speakers, their elements are just echoed by what I've experienced. Yes, I started out in I suppose that's my IT career. I started in the 1980s, and I started as a programmer. I actually wanted to be a scene of crimes officer for the police, but nothing to do with bias. They wouldn't let me in because I had an injured knee. I suppose you could be knee biased, but I fell into computing. Started out as a programmer, and then realized that actually I wasn't a very good programmer because, well, I wasn't perceived as a good programmer because I took too long to write code, which then pushed me into the quality side and looking around for how do you write good code. That took me into the world of testing. Then I had an opportunity to work with test automation as it was coming out then in terms of test running tools, and basically found my niche, didn't look back, didn't change from that, loved testing and wouldn't change out of it. But one of the things that's made me, for this particular talk, made me really think about it is that I think I was possibly bias blind at the start of my career, in that I was raised more by my father at that point, and had this perception that I could do anything, that there was no issue. So I went into a lot of things not really perceiving the bias, just getting in there, getting started, and if I felt I could give it a go, I'd give it a go. So these sorts of conversations really open up the whole perspective of what is a bias and how does it hold you back. And that's one of the things I was hoping to get out of this conversation today.
Thank you so much, Sue. It's amazingly inspirational to hear what you've all been through in your own journeys. And I can relate to so much of it in my own journey, starting from, starting as a developer, going into tester. When I entered technology, I never thought I would someday sit and wonder, why do we have lack of female representation? But it happened much sooner than I thought. A profession that I imagined to be much more level field than it is actually. It is to me till date a bit of a surprise that we still don't see the kind of equality in technology till date. So it is a bit of a shame, but I believe change can happen in a kind of a very quick manner, sometimes in a very unexpected manner. But thank you very much, everybody, for sharing those thoughts. I'll just at this point go into our Mentimeter poll, which we decided to hold as an audience poll, to understand if there are any topics that people would like to hear more about. So this is the current voting on our Mentimeter poll. So we have had 5 topics that we chose as a team, the panelists and the team in STG, and I believe the current vote indicates 2 topics to have been incredibly popular. One is increasing diversity in technology or technical roles, and the other is key challenges for women in achieving leadership roles. I believe both are incredibly strong themes. So without further ado, should I now maybe start our conversation on increasing diversity in technology or technical roles? Can I request our panelists to please come forward and share some thoughts on this? Thank you.
I'll come in on this because I know I've said this to you 6 before, and possibly to other people who are out there in the audience, but I did my computer science degree in the 1970s, and at that stage, I did a computer science degree, and it was considered to be a woman's subject. Doing programming was considered to be a woman's role, and a suitable role for women to do, for example, if they were at home looking after children. And it wasn't because we were dealing with more simple technical domains, because it was finance software. In the case of something I worked on as a programmer, chemical plant process control software, it's not trivial stuff. So the proportion of men and women was very even when I did my computer science degree and in those first few jobs that I had. And it feels to me it's changed since then. So those of you, in fact, I think everybody on here is younger than I am. Okay, so those of you that came in later, I think you've had a different experience perhaps to the one that I had.
You're right, Isabel. By the time I went to university, which wasn't that long after you, to be honest, if you know what I mean, it was the 1990s. It was very much a male-dominated discipline. As I said, I think there was only 4 females in my year at school, and throughout my early career, it was very much male dominated as well. And by the time I'd reached the management team level, I was the only female at the management team level. And I think a lot of this starts at school. If you know what I mean, I think the subjects that are taught at school, the way that they're taught, if you know what I mean. I've got a 15-year-old daughter who's very, very maths and engineering orientated, but she's going in to do her hires, and she's only one of 3 females that are going to do physics as a hire, if you know what I mean, and things like that. I think that there is definitely something, I don't know what the answer is immediately, but there's definitely something that we need to do at school level now, because they're still encouraging males to do more of the science and maths-based subjects than they are females. Females, it's very much modern studies and history and subjects like that at the moment.
I totally agree, Pauline. I think, like, and even from a personal perspective, I was classed as one of the weird girls in school, because I very much wanted to study maths, science, my whole thing was maths, physics, and I was one of the first year to do a computing hire, so that'll tell you the age that I am. But a lot of it was very much, I can remember it starts at school, I was in technical drawing, and I get pulled out the class by the ear, which wouldn't be allowed in this day and age. But I pulled out the class saying to me, you need to, we're putting you forward, Sharon, for Pupil of the Year. But they didn't call me Sharon at the time, because at that time you get called by your surname if you were in any of the male classes. So I wasn't even called by my first name, I was called Kef. So that was my surname. So it just shows you how much we've changed. But at that point, I can remember getting pulled out of the class, told at that time, you're going to be put forward for this. And then when it was given to a boy in the class, was pulled out again and says, the only reason you never got that is because you're a girl. Do you know, so at that very young age, that was what was instilled. And where I think you're 100% right, we need to get in a position that we are influencing in schools to try and change the mindset of, and it's not just technology for me, it's like your science, your engineering, your maths, it's that whole STEM subject. And it's not even like the pupils, it's parents. We need to start educating parents at a really earlier age to say that there is other things out there. You don't need girls to go into like the different subjects that we speak about, like modern studies, like home economics, all of that kind of stuff. It's about trying to educate as early as we possibly can.
Isabel?
I'm just recalling the very first conversation I ever had with Maaret. Maaret, you were teaching girls to code, and we had this conversation about why you'd found that necessary and how you were doing it, which I was completely fascinated by.
Yeah, I started, I think they were 4 years old at the time when I started with the group of girls. Mm-hmm. And it really came from kind of like my personal experience. And when I eventually really learned coding, like I had a computer science studies and degree. So theoretically, I knew coding after that, but I didn't enjoy it. Mm-hmm. But like back about 8 years ago, when I learned about ensemble programming, like group programming together, the social aspect, that was something that really drew me in. I started realizing that I don't have to be alone and there's the social aspect. And then, of course, when I realized that, I wanted to somehow contribute that back to my daughter. So I started teaching 4-year-old girls as a whole group, like the whole age group through kindergarten, so that the girls would say to each other kind of like, you know, we all code. Like it's not just this one that was taught. We were all coding. And I made it a social activity. And it was a huge difference. So I hope kind of we find still new ways of teaching and not just go with the you know age-old, same old teaching practices. And well, the teaching style as well as the purpose. I think almost every tester that I ever talked to, we find a lot more motivation in the purpose of the software than the code itself. But very few of us actually end up completely minding the code as long as the purpose is something that we consider worthwhile.
Thank you, Maaret. That's a very interesting thought that's come from a member of audience. Josephine Fowler is trying to highlight how perhaps the kind of emergence of gaming made it all very male, and it somehow was perceived as less female thing. And as a parent of a young girl, I have to highlight something that I notice with all of the kind of toys and general merchandise that I look for, because I have a boy and a girl. I find the boy toys a bit much more about outdoors, adventure, it's sciencey, it's planets, it's everything. Everything for my girl is pink and princess, and it's incredibly difficult for me when I go into a shop to find something that doesn't convey a proper stereotype message. And there's a movement actually called "Let Toys Be Toys." So this has been a subject of a lot of attention to say that girl toys are less technical, less challenging in many ways, but are more expensive. They're pink. And there's a very strong stereotyped projection to girls from a very young age that you're meant to do a certain role. And it's likewise with boys, it's kind of, yes, it's much more all the Lego and everything. It's all seems to be targeted at boys, whatever involves the higher level of mental challenge, almost to undermine what the girl population could potentially enjoy or kind of grow up to like and be good at. So I completely agree. I think there's a very societal bias, and also perhaps, this whole idea of good marketing. What will sell is very little ethics in some level to say this will appeal to a society which has been already conditioned to seeing women in a certain role. So yeah, I fully take that. And there's another question from Robert Kirkwood. It says, why does the panel think we are still not attracting women into tech in anything like the numbers we see in the males? While yes, there's perhaps a more long-term kind of correction, if you like, of how we have our education system and the messaging for both genders. Is there anything we can do in the current situation to make tech a more attractive place for women? Is there anything we can do maybe to influence maybe adolescent teenagers, women, girls who are looking for a career option? Can tech be made more attractive to them?
I think that one of the points I think I made earlier that was important to me was the flexibility. And I think I'm stereotyping women of a certain age here, if you know what I mean, as well, but I think that flexibility becomes really important. Remote working has really helped that, and it would be interesting to see over the next few years whether the number of females that are interested in careers, because actually technology can be worked so easily, if you know what I mean, at home, whether that becomes a more attractive career option for females, if you mean, in the future. We'll not know for a few years, but I definitely think that it's that offering technology as a flexible career where you can work really from anywhere, and you can fit it in numerous times, if you know what I mean, in the day, round about other things, will definitely help.
I also think it's about educating like kids that are even at college or coming through schools. I was involved in a lot of the Ada Lovelace sessions with local colleges and universities and schools and things, and it's about advising what's out there as like all the different roles. I think when people think of technology, they think, oh, I need to be able to like code, and I need to have that technical background, and I need to understand how coding, and I'm not really interested in that. And it's about when the sessions I go is, I don't fit into a stereotypical, or you work in technology, you're really, really geeky. I always go to these sessions dressed quite casual, get down with the kids kind of thing, so that you can relate to them, and so that you can see there's all of these different roles in technology that we can see, like testing, for example, that they don't know what testing is, at that age. So it's explaining all the different like project management, like design, all of these different areas, and I think we're not good at that, if I'm honest. And that's where I try, and when I go to these sessions and get involved in them, I try and bring that around. And that for me, it's great, because the feedback you get, that girls that like, they'll come along to you and go, I didn't even know that existed, or could you give me more information on that? And then you're taking along to different schools, and it's about it's marketing, isn't it? It's about going out there and saying, this is exactly what you can get involved in. Don't just think you need to be this certain kind of geeky way that loads of people have in their mind.
So you've just joined us. Any thoughts on what could make tech a good place, an attractive place for women to choose as a career option? Please, if you want to share some thoughts.
Well, I just noticed Maaret put her hand up. So if you had a point carrying on,
Yes,
okay.
Please do come. Sorry, I didn't notice.
I agree with what exactly what with Sharon was saying just a few moments ago. In that it's the phrase that came to my mind at that point is, "Don't judge the book by the cover." In that we seem to put the pictures, images on people as to, you know, if you dress like this, then this is what you're doing. This is the person you are. This is the role you are. I certainly, when I started my career, when I was working with the test automation tools and I had to go to conferences, I followed the dress code, which was fascinating when you look back on it now and you wonder, why the hell did I do that? I wore the navy blue suit, and because I was a female in that role at that time, I wore the skirt navy blue suit, and presented the tools that I was marketing at the time, and got reasonable feedback. But I was fascinated to look back on it as to, why did we do that? Why does that happen? So there's something around just getting people in tech, or people to recognize that being in tech doesn't mean that you have to be a geek. I certainly know a friend of mine has 2 daughters, and I got I don't have children myself, but I got involved with their growing up. And yes, I introduced them to testing when they were very little. They've both gone on into careers that you probably wouldn't think would be the stereotypical. One's a biochemist and the other one's an astrophysicist. So they didn't have any problems in thinking that that was available to them in what they're doing. It's something around how we position this role, recognizing all the skills that need to come into play, that make the mix of the role that we're actually working on.
Thank you. So, Maaret, please, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot in the recent days again on the idea that talent is quite equally distributed and divided in the general population in the world, whereas opportunity isn't. And the little things that we can do, each and every one of us, and me in particular, is to recognize someone who needs that opportunity and give it, even though there might be something that kind of for me says in, the style or whatever biases I might have, that they are not the right person for that. And I had to face that again today when I was sent a CV of someone in a business school wanting to start a tech career, and I caught myself in the moment thinking, business school, why not a tech school? So again, kind of, just the brief moment of recognition of there's something where I might be stopping someone from having that opportunity. And the fact that, over the years, when you're around enough years, you can actually, quite many people can flow through you or by you and get started well in this whole industry. So if we do that in scale, there's a huge potential in that.
Thank you, Maaret. I don't know if it's worth thinking about whether the pandemic in its own way has by any chance left a bit of a positive sign for women to consider tech, because remote working is surely something of a privilege, and hopefully it is for people who can kind of find that a privilege, of course, particularly in terms of flexibility, lack of commute, the pressure of not having to be, having to pick up your children and do 100 other things while you're working. Hopefully it's kind of given some sort of a headway to making tech career more attractive. I don't know if that's something the panelists think is a positive side of pandemic, if I can call it that.
I think there's a positive side in, as you put it. There's been a seismic shift because of the pandemic, and I think what's happening currently is going to be another seismic shift that sort of dovetails with the pandemic. I went to fill up the car today, as I'm sure a lot of other folks are doing, and realised that fuel is now, for me, at 161 a litre, which is basically meaning that for me, driving anywhere to a job, I live remotely in the middle of a forest, which is one of the reasons why we had a power blip a few moments ago when I dropped off the meeting. So dovetailing into that seismic shift, we're going to be doing remote working a lot more. And I do think it does actually allow all sorts of different people who previously might not have been able to get into a career in tech because of other things, that to be able to access those sorts of roles, because remote working is now more established. And if we are not able, because of socioeconomic reasons, not just the pandemic, to travel, then it's going to broaden out the perspective to say that, yes, more people should have access to it.
It's a very good point. I think there might be a lot of things happening around the world that might somehow make it more conducive for tech to be an attractive place for different reasons, various different reasons. There's a very good question by Anna Macmillan. Do you think there's an argument that there are gender typical characteristics that women have which give them an advantage in for roles in tech? So there might be a way to kind of turn this on its head to say, fair enough, you think women are softer, they are more emotional, etc. But there's the other side, that they perhaps bring in empathy and kind of an element of strength, and kind of a lot of women are seen to be the people, kind of somebody that people would like to kind of open up to, etc. So there's many positive characteristics associated with women, even if we go down that stereotypical narrative. So Isabel, you're looking to come in, please do.
I'm going to resist that idea with every fibre of my being. We can't have it both ways. We can't have it both ways. Either there's people, and they all have different characteristics, and they all get treated the same, and some of them are good at this and some of them are good at that, and it's not to do with gender. Or, we just accept that we're stuck in the roles that people gave us. And I speak about that as a woman who does not fit into those stereotypes of being particularly empathetic or having a family or any of those things. And when we met for the rehearsal, the tech rehearsal, and you made a comment about, what have we experienced in the way of bias? And I was kind of thinking, have I in my life in tech? And then I remembered an occasion when my manager said to me, would I go and speak to, I can't remember who it was now, because they were having a bad time today. And I said, because I was busy with a spreadsheet, why are you asking me to do that? And he said, because you're a woman. And I was really angry. So no, absolutely not. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot have it both ways.
I totally agree, Isabel. I think you look at everyone as an individual and what qualities they bring as an individual. I have to, your reason there, it makes me laugh. I had the exact same thing we were doing an interview, and honestly, me and one of the other managers in a previous organisation, and at that very point, the person who was best for the role was a female. And the manager who I was interviewing with at the time went, "We can't give her the role." And I went, "Sorry, how can we not give her the role? She is very much the best person for the role." And he went, "No, because she's at that age, she's got to leave and have babies." And I thought, oh my word. I was like, you cannot say that. I was like that. This is an HR conversation if that is the way we are going to go. Do you know? And he was my manager. And I thought, you cannot not employ someone because you think they're of an age to have babies, do you know, and they're going to go off in maternity. So yeah, I think we can lightly all have these. So I am very much, you look at the individual and what they bring to the organisation, and it doesn't matter. It's about inclusion and that whole diversity, and everybody has what they bring as an individual to your team.
And I'll come on to that as well. The number of men I know who have imposter syndrome, who are empathetic, who are good, you know, who think about other people, who are team workers. It kind of like, no, it cuts across the board in all directions. This is about treating everybody the same, or treating everybody as they need to be treated, I guess.
I think it's about valuing the aptitudes. Everybody has different aptitudes, and valuing what they can bring to the party. So, yeah, not based on gender. So, yeah.
But you do get practice on certain things when you happen to be socialized into a gender, and you allow people to kind of guide you into that. Like the amount of empathetic or maybe even fake empathetic conversations I've needed to practice on, because I couldn't work on that spreadsheet, even though I wanted to, because I would be punished for that. Like it was not really an option. I am pretty good at you know, at least appearing empathetic these days. And there's many other skills that, you know, you have had a chance of practicing. For example, allowing other people speak seems to be something that women are a little bit, you know, more socialized into learning rather than taking all the space possible. And I've worked very hard on not staying quiet all the time, just to make space for everyone else. So I think actually there is a little bit of both ways, but it's more on the socializing rather than we are born with it, the kind of, you know, the experiences that you gather because of, you know, fulfilling people's expectations. And I would love it to be so that we don't have to be that. I would love it that we wouldn't talk about, you know, women and men and kind of these categories, and we could all be individuals. And that's really the hope of gender equality I'm looking for. And again, men, women, and non-binary people. So let's also remember our separate category in this binary that we so easily slip into.
It's a very, very good point, Maaret. Thank you. Pauline, any thoughts on this whole idea of, associating certain attributes to women? Is that something you're comfortable with? Is that something we should embrace, or is it something we should perhaps be critical about?
No, I think I agree with a lot of the comments that the other panelists have been saying. If you know what I mean, it's about finding the best person for the job. I think for me the other thing that we need to consider is actually sometimes women are our worst critics in this too. I was having a conversation with a friend quite recently, and we'd been reading a book as part of a book group, and it was about a really empowered woman during the Second World War. And it got us talking into the wider conversation about women's roles and the role that women perform in organisations. And her comment to me when I had commented about the fact I was an only female in a management team, and she says, "Oh, you're ticking the female box." If you mean, and she didn't really mean that as an insult, if you mean, or from her, but clearly I thought, well, no, I'm there by merit. If you mean, so I think women, we need to be supportive of one another to know that we actually get to these positions through having the skill, if you mean, and the capability to deliver them, and that we're not at times ticking boxes, or if you mean the token female, or that we are fulfilling an empathetic role, if you mean for organisations, that we're there because we're actually good at what we do.
But do you wonder sometimes that we make too much of that ticking the box thing, that if I got there, I am there, and I wouldn't. I'm not sure that I should be worried if I was ticking the female box, if you see what I mean. That I hope I've got there by my own merit. If I later found out that I'd got there because I was just the token female, then that might disturb me. But I'm also wondering whether I should be worried. I'm there, I can do the job, and I can show that I do the job.
No, totally agree that that's the case, but it's the perception of other people, and sometimes perception is reality. And if they think that you're only there because you're ticking a box, if you mean it then the impact that can have, if you mean, on others and their children when they're having that conversation about what they want to do for careers and things like that, that sometimes women are only getting into these positions because they're meeting a gender balance, if you know what I mean, kind of statistic, is probably not setting ourselves up to succeed and continue to develop as a gender, if you know what I mean, and make sure that we're fulfilling our roles.
But aren't the men getting to those positions ticking a box as well then? You know, there's this saying going around on the Twitter spaces that while women might be considered diversity hires, men are almost always privilege hires. So again, you know, it's another kind of a tick that we get there. So maybe we shouldn't be so bothered by the, you know, the characteristics that we can't help but bring within ourselves. And at least for me, kind of like, you know, learning these certain responses that people tend to give back on these kind of, you know, everyday situations, and having some of them memorized by seeing them around, it has helped me deal on everyday life getting these kind of comments. And I really need to appreciate Fiona Charles for teaching me that I really shouldn't care that I'm going to be the one woman who is trying to do keynoting. Like, there's already, you know, enough people who are not having the same experience as I have going on those keynote stages. So I shouldn't be so bothered and kind of like stopping myself at that just because I'm also ticking a box. So it can also be very kind of harmful in that sense.
Thank you. Thank you, panelists. I see this topic actually has really kind of got us all going, because I think we all have our own experiences of how women are perceived in tech. And I know there's another line of thought which says recruitment is done in such a kind of biased line. There's very unsaid kind of things in a job advertisement that clearly shouts it's a man they want. You know, there's many aspects to our industry, the way it's functioning currently, that might have to be reviewed thoroughly to see whether or not we are making it a strong enough case for women to consider tech to be their career of choice. I'm afraid, because we really did promise to cover 2 topics from our Mentimeter poll, I'm kind of compelled to take up the next one just in the interest of time, maybe very briefly, to say what are the challenges for women in achieving leadership roles. And this is a matter of much debate across the world in all organizations, all types of organization, all sides of team. Why do we see women kind of getting more and more sparse as the kind of pyramid goes higher? There's something that women are not able to crack here. What is it that we need to do better? Pauline, if I can please invite you to share some thoughts on this, please.
Yeah, I guess if I talk from a personal perspective, and I think it may resonate, is the idea of having a voice. If you've been treated equally and having that voice, I personally have struggled at times to feel as if I'm being listened to, if you mean, and I'm portraying a senior manager or if you mean in a leadership role, compared to that, I will come across as aggressive, if you mean, or viewed as aggressive if I try to be to speak in a certain way. And that's the thing that's really held me back. And I think many women feel that fear that if they do try to come across as being assertive, they're viewed as being aggressive at times, and it's not a desired characteristic that a lot of us want to have, and so therefore we're more inclined to be quiet at times and not put ourselves into that position. And I think that's one of the points for me that's relatively key, and so therefore their voice and their opinions are not being heard.
Thank you. Please.
I think I'm with you on that, but I think for me as well, I wrote key points down for this question because I thought it's so, it sits very strong with me. So I wrote imposter syndrome, trusting your own voice, being treated equally, and an advocate of on your own behalf. And that kind of goes into that. Men ambition is considered as a sign of strength, but when you look at it from a woman's point of view, or how it's seen, is you've got that arrogance, or who does she think she is? Do you know, that kind of mentality. And the imposter syndrome is something that I have struggled with over different stages of my life, if I'm honest, and in different roles. Purely like you look at it like at university, then at like your first job, and then how they picked me for that role. Should I really be doing that? So I think for me, all of these things kind of are challenges for women in a leadership role. But I think we just need to try, for the imposter syndrome for me, how I've dealt with that on a personal level is actually writing down my achievements. So instead of thinking about, should I be doing that? Am I that right person for that role? I write down my key achievements and then keep going over that and going, stop questioning yourself. And there's a thing up on my board to the left-hand side of me. And do you know what it says? Believe. Do you know, I always think, believe in yourself. You know this, and don't allow any other, the negativity and that imposter allowing you to come in. So every day I get up and I look at that, believe. And that's how I try and deal with the kind of imposter syndrome. But I think a lot of women do struggle with it, and men. But I know from my own personal perspective, that's how I deal with it.
Thank you, Sharon. And this is something that I notice, very commonly, is that women have perhaps a higher fear of failure and tend to hold back because they don't have that self-belief. And I had a very interesting argument in another panel discussion I attended a few months ago, a conference in India, and Priya Tandon, who is she's a leading influencer in tech world, and she said, just think about it. Your male counterparts are doing the same. They're making mistakes and they're learning from it. And to hold yourself back with the fear of failure, you're really not giving yourself an opportunity to get that experience that you need. Failure is part of that experience, and to fear failure and lose opportunities because of that, it's a kind of a lost kind of case for women. It's kind of almost counterintuitive to kind of say, oh gosh, I don't want to fail. I don't want to kind of lose face, and that's why I'll not apply for the job. And I think it might be out of my league, etc. So no, I agree. I think there's some kind of hesitation that women have in themselves that kind of perhaps holds them and becomes a bit of a barrier. But I wonder if there are other things that also influence these things. Is there better mentoring and coaching for men than women? I don't know. Is there something that's lacking from a development point of view that perhaps men have better access to than women? I don't know if it kind of that's an area that needs a bit of a review. Maaret, do you have any views on that?
I'm not sure if I have anything in particular on that one. No.
What's your view on what perhaps makes women not really be so strongly represented in leadership roles, in your observation, in your experience?
I'm not sure if I know that. Like, I just know that I don't want to be in a leadership position myself. I want to be in a technical role, and it always feels a little uncomfortable for me that we're so heavily kind of pushing people into leadership, because I feel like women are being pushed to leadership, and then we're kind of left on the middle level of management instead of real leadership, which then means that we're actually kind of sidelining many of the great women. So in a way, I'd love to see much more people all the way to the top. I don't think that's happening enough. But I also really like an increased appreciation of the fact that being really impactful in your tech role is also a choice. And I'd love to see more women in that space, leading architectures and leading the technical choices and the future technologies that become the state of the art. And that's definitely the space that I feel more comfortable myself in nowadays.
Thank you, Maaret. It's such a great point that you made there. I think perhaps there is an excessive emphasis on women being seen, in leadership skills, as if that's the best representation of gender equality. That in itself is questionable. And indeed, our idea of leadership is kind of perhaps to be looked at closely. What do we mean by leadership? It need not be kind of making it to the board, etc. It could very much be a voice of being an influence, and as you said, somebody who drives things, initiatives, and thought leadership. So that brought the spotlight on a very, very interesting aspect of that whole debate. Thank you. Thanks, Maaret. So you're looking to come in?
I was just thinking that I've long thought that traditional management structures needed a revamp, because this idea that you start at the bottom, you work your way through, and you eventually end up at the top, and that's where your rewards are when you're at the top. I've long felt that that's not a particularly good way of structuring it, because going back to the idea of aptitudes, that if people have an aptitude for something, their reward should be developed in that area. So people that have an aptitude for bringing people on, that should be valued and rewarded for that role. So there is always this question as to why people in the quality area don't move up to the top. I've always wondered that. I've never seen a previous tester become a CEO or something like that. I've never found that. I've never encountered that, and I'd love to find that, because then we've got that synergy of thought. But a revamp on the career structure might help, because we're saying, well, I'm saying, rather than having this defined way of success by being at the top, success could lie in the fact that you've managed to introduce hundreds or thousands of testers into the fold. So different ways of valuing what you're doing, rather than saying, I've got to become a senior manager, which people might not want.
Thank you, Sue. Isabel, any thoughts on this topic before we close it? No. Cheers. I have a couple of questions in the Q&A that I might have to kind of voice here. I think this one's from the previous topic. I think, Pauline, you mentioned a book about women during the Second World War.
Yes.
Hannah Johansson is looking for the title of it. Please, if you can type that in the chat area.
I will do. I'll need to look up the author. I can't remember who it is that writes it, but I will do. It's very good.
Thank you. We have the next question from Robert Kirkwood. It's great to hear that positive discrimination is not being tolerated, and merit seems to be the key for progressing people. My experience, especially PwC, was that teams with broad diversity were amongst the highest performing teams. What can the STG do to promote and advocate greater diversity in attracting and recruiting people into our working domains? I don't know who wants to take this. As the only male panelist of today's session, David, do you want to come in on this, please?
do I want to come in on what the STG specifically can do to help it? That's that's a very interesting question. I was not expecting to be brought in. I was just peacefully sitting in the background there.
Put you in a spot.
You put me on the spot. That's terrible. This is a plant from yourself and Robert, isn't it, to get me talking? It's an interesting question. I think this is a great session that we're having. This is the second year in a row that we've decided to have this session in celebration of International Women's Day. It's really, really good because we've been able to promote this quite heavily on LinkedIn and Twitter and within our organisation. So it starts to put out a more positive message of, we're trying to promote this as a great thing. So I'd encourage us to continue to do more of that and to make sure that we do get a good balance in the speakers that we have and the types of sessions that we continue to hold. To me, this is a really powerful session, and I learn a lot just by listening, actually, and allowing people to be heard. I think that's important, is that this kind of a platform has given you a voice. It's a small audience just now, but it will then be recorded and made available on YouTube for others to watch, and we can continue to promote it. I mean, I'm more than happy to take actions away from this and see how I can help, because it's all fine and well me kind of sitting listening here, but there probably are things that I can do. So what would you like me to do? How can I help you is the way that I would reframe it.
Maybe you can name the CEOs who have a testing background. There's plenty of them. Someone needs to find them, and we need some people who will also make us aware of all of them. I can only name about 10 of them if I need to start naming them right now, but it is definitely something that requires some focus. So maybe that's a call for action for everyone.
Absolutely. What a brilliant point. And indeed, we need to celebrate the success stories. And we really need to talk about struggles as much as success stories. I guess we need to hear from women. We need to hear more from all of the gender spectrum, but really the voices that haven't been heard. We really should try to project them as much as we can. I fully support what David said. I think we all need that introspection to see, is everybody getting that voice, an opportunity to express and be seen and heard? So thanks very, very much for all the thoughts. I'm afraid we have come to the end of the hour. While I would have loved to have continued, I'm afraid we should look to wind up the event shortly. So I think before we kind of bring the session to a close, just a quick message from me to say, please do watch out for the next event from STG, which is also on the topic of diversity, as it happens on the topic of accessibility, a topic that's very close to my heart. So on the 19th of May, which is Global Accessibility Awareness Day, we're going to hold another similar panel discussion, and that time the focus will be about accessibility and the significance of the topic. But for now, coming back to our session and kind of bring it to a conclusion, may I request all the panelists to please share a concluding thought as a final thing. Isabel, please, if you would like to go first.
Oh, you've asked me first again, and I haven't thought of anything. I think it's interesting. I think it would be interesting to do a session like this, but with a more diverse group of people. To actually, it's good to have heard from David there. I think that comes back to my thing about, it's not about women separating off and going, oh, this is us and what do we need? It's actually about everybody together. I still feel that at the end of this session.
Thank you, Isabel. Maaret, do you have any final thoughts?
For new people coming into this industry, there's no merit, there is only potential. So everyone is equally qualified to get started. So we could just pick up people who we usually wouldn't and give them chances. We might be surprised.
Thank you, Maaret. Pauline, please, if you'd like to share any final thoughts.
Just, it's been fascinating hearing lots of points of view, and I think that's the beauty of diversity, isn't it? Is that you get experience of lots of people's opinions, and actually you come out of these things richer than you went into them. So if you mean that, it's just a big thanks to everybody that's contributed.
Thank you. Sharon, any final thoughts?
I think mine is thanks very much for inviting me along to be part of the panel. I love these sessions. I'm very passionate about testing. I love testing. I never want to be a CEO because I feel when you get to that, and that's why I think sometimes it's all right not to want to then go higher in any organisation. One thing that I would like everybody to take away from this is take the knocks as a positive. Don't take them as failings. Remove the word failing from your vocabulary. As women, we focus on failures. Instead of that, start looking at them as positives and get back up fighting stronger.
Thank you, Sharon. And last, but definitely not the least, Sue, please, if you'd like to finalize.
Brilliant, thank you. A book I read years ago, and you don't actually need to read the book, applicable to anybody and everybody, is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And that's it, just give it a go.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. All the panelists, my sincere gratitude for you to have taken the time to join us and sharing some really insightful and inspirational thoughts. And I really hope whoever's watched it with us today live and whoever's watching it as a recording, you'll have a lot of takeaway points. I thought it was incredibly thought-provoking. Thank you ever so much, everybody, for have joined, all members of audience. Thank you very, very much for actively participating. Really, I think it's been such a great experience for me. This is my takeaway, just the joy of having witnessed this conversation. So thank you, STG, for really supporting this whole initiative. And thank you very, very much, everybody, and wishing a very happy International Women's Day to all the women. Yeah, a very nice evening to everybody, and hope to see everyone at the next event, 19th of May, 6 p.m. on accessibility. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you for organising, Sowmya, and thank you for everybody to joining tonight. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.